Hey, everyone. You are about to listen to one of the most interesting, incredible human beings you've ever listened to. I mean, I listened to this guy, Charlie Engle, speak 2 or 3 months ago. I'm like, I have to get this guy on the podcast and get him to you and listen to you. He is absolutely incredible. He's going to talk about his story of addiction to drugs, to alcohol and heavy drugs, what changed his life, how fear of who he's becoming got him into running. This guy ran across the Sahara Desert, 125 degree heat, 2 marathons a day for 111 days straight, over 5,000 miles. Think about the mental toughness you need to have, not to mention physically, but mental toughness to do that. He talks about that mindset, the mindset in his mind versus the physical body, and like how he balances the two. The self-awareness and how he's grown his self-awareness. He's doing an incredible journey coming up, which you're going to have to listen to find out. And he's going to tell his story, really his purpose behind it and why he's doing it, which is absolutely different than a purpose I've heard from anybody else. Really intriguing. He talks about, how he focuses on process versus outcome. He actually ties that to how we parent our kids a lot of times, and we're teaching them the wrong things. This discussion was incredible. Federal prison, doing another journey, just an incredible, interesting guy. I can't wait to get this one to you all. Check it out. Hello and welcome to the Purpose Matrix. I am as excited as I could be for today's guest, Mr. Charlie Engle. Charlie, how are you doing today?
Doing great, brother. Thanks for having me on, Phil.
You guys are in for an absolute treat. I saw Charlie speak maybe 2 or 3 months ago. We connected in between there. Holy cow. What a story. What a background. What a set of experiences. And honestly, what a mindset that this gentleman has that we're going to learn from today, that I've learned so much from already. So I'm excited to share with you. So Charlie, he's a writer. He wrote a book, Running Man. He is the running man. I'm sure we'll hear the story as to how he started being called Running Man. He's a recovering addict, a keynote speaker, spent time in federal prison, has done some absolutely incredible things across the world. Charlie, you introduce yourself. Who is Charlie Engle?
Wow. Great question. I mean, a work in progress is definitely what comes to mind right away. I jokingly say that I've reached an age where one would think I might have some things figured out, but what I think, who I really am is that person that's still in my early 60s, pretty much extremely curious. I still have so much more I want to do. It's funny when I do a podcast or I have a conversation with someone that involves a lot of the things that I have done in the past. It's almost like I have to reset my mind because I am so future focused. It's really more, I love talking about what's next and what's down the road and all of that. And I actually, my wife is fond of reminding me that, I really don't spend a lot of time talking about what's happened in the past, whether the good stuff, the bad stuff. And so I hope I'm a person that is always focused on, what's coming up next and how it can help prepare me for the rest of my life.
We're going to get into your story more because it's too incredible to gloss over, but is the future focus an issue, do you think, for you? Or is it like, are you able to be present? So you've done some incredible runs and things that you're in nature a lot and like you have that opportunity, but is your mind always running or are you able to be where you're at?
Depends on the day. And I'll lead with a tidbit that is informative, and that is that my wife has been, battling a really serious cancer for over 8 years. And so my daily existence here in my house is a reminder of, being present, but also making the best of, the good days, getting through the hard days and looking towards the future for what, I'll never stop dreaming about what we're going to do when things improve, but also not to get caught up in that mindset that the only good times are in front of us. The days when she has really good days, we try to maximize those and get out there and do some stuff. So presence is a hard thing for me, though. I mean, I am for years, I definitely was that guy. I used to tell the story that, I ran a couple hundred marathons early in my running career, and I can't tell you how many times I would be at the mile 20 mark of some big marathon, and I'm already thinking about the marathon that I'm doing, the next month, like how I'm going to do things differently or where I'm going to be, instead of just being there. Now I was in my early 30s, and so I definitely haven't figured it out, and I have to constantly pull myself back to the present.
Yeah. Well, I think it's hard for a lot of people, and a lot of people that might be listening. You're driven, you're trying to get better, and you're trying to get better for the future. So our minds just go there. I know I have the same challenge. So just trying to be where we are and be present, I think, is so important. You talked about running. You've referenced it. I think for the listeners, you have no idea what this guy's done. You're going to hear a little bit more here in a little bit. But before we get into running and like the specifics of it, what led you to that? Tell us a little bit of the backstory that got you into running and what you're doing now.
Yeah, thanks for that. In short, I'll keep this part brief because there's tons of info, online on my own website and places about, sort of my background. And I'd love it if people pick up my book. But in short, I was kind of that superstar guy in high school. Super young parents. My mom was 18 when I was born, and parents divorced early, and all of that. And when I went to college at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, I thought I was going to be that superstar still in college. And I got to college and found out just how incredibly average I was. And like everybody there, my freshman class was 4,000 other students with the same kind of resume and sports and academics and all of that I had. And I got lost. And, I'm old enough that when I went to high school, or when I went to college, the drinking age was still 18 in North Carolina. And, and as I like to say, I became a first team All-American drinker. And whether it's genetics or my penchant for endurance, I basically could just drink more than anyone else, and not a good thing. And my, cocaine, as I like to call the 80s, the decade of cocaine, became a really prevalent part of my life. And suffice it to say, the next 10 years of my life were really buried in this non-ending cycle of high achieving, both in my jobs and some in sports, and then diving into the abyss, for 6 months at a time, with drugs and alcohol, and just trying not to die, basically. And, and that led me, the question was, how did I really, I had always been a runner, but when I finally, the birth of my first son was the real catalyst for me recognizing that, I wasn't going to survive my habits, and I needed to stop. And it's not that easy, but that's simply what I did. And what I found was equal parts running and sobriety, and going to meetings and doing the traditional 12-step recovery. For 3 straight years when I got sober, I was 29 years old. I went to a meeting every single day for 3 years without missing a day, and I ran my ass off every day. Probably in a borderline unhealthy way. I just ran hard because I wanted to kick my own ass every single day and not take any chance. When my head hit the pillow every single night, I wanted to be so exhausted that there was no other thought in my mind except going to sleep. And, through that process, in those first 3 years, I ran, 35 marathons, which was pretty addictive behavior, quite frankly. But, it sort of set the stage for this growth spurt for me over the following decades.
Yeah. And what I would say from reading your book, and by the way, this is whether you read or audible, Charlie tells a phenomenal story. And it's just, there's so much depth to this in the book that you have to check out. What I will say is Charlie is, I think, if this is fair, Charlie, glossing over the severity maybe of the addiction and not, alcohol, very heavy drugs, some very, very aggressive, long binges. And I apologize for kind of calling you out, but you say it in the book, but this was a major, major thing. And there was a scary incident, I think, as well, that in addition to was it around the time your child was born, but then some scary incidences that came up, like just, I got to get this together. Tell us a little bit about that story. And then I want to ask about fear a little bit, because you referenced it. And I want to come back to that.
Yeah, believe me, I don't hold back in the book, obviously, for brevity. I was keeping it short today. But I mean, on that incident, my son had been born. I was determined, as any decent human being would be, that I was going to be, the best dad I could possibly be, and like all of that. And for a couple of months that worked. And 2 months into his life, like nothing happened. There was no argument with my wife or a catalyst at work or anything else, but I ended up in, the worst neighborhood in town, smoking crack and drinking and just destroying everything. And I think the real lesson there is, I hadn't done any work. I had just stopped. And a lot of times people may stop a particular habit that isn't serving them. And it's not about replacing it with something else, but if you haven't really explored the root causes of where that came from to begin with, because rarely is the habit's a symptom. It's not the thing itself. And so that root cause that's buried way down in there has to be dealt with. And if it's not dealt with, it's going to manifest in some other way. It may not be drinking or drugs, but, and so that binge ended with me handcuffed on the ground and the police searching my car, and there's bullet holes in my car. And, I'm looking around like, okay, yeah, this seems like a good time to quit. And as I tell the story, the real zinger that hit me while I'm sitting on the ground there was just this idea that nobody was coming to save me. And that's not a pitiful statement. That's a recognition of the fact that for all of us, we have to take that first real step. And then there's lots of support in the community and the family and the wherever that might come from. There's always going to be support, but, nobody else can force us to make that change. Very often, everybody listen to this either has struggled with addiction themselves, has a family member who's struggled, has a friend who's struggled, has lost somebody to addiction. So everybody knows what I'm talking about. You cannot make someone quit. They have to come to that recognition first, and then you can support them in their new life. And, for me, that's what happened.
Yeah. And I want to come back. We kind of talked about this earlier, but self-awareness. Before we do, it sounds like your fear of either who you are. I'm going to talk about fear and your relationship with fear and how you think about fear. So I want to get into that. But I think the fear of who you were, who are you becoming, fear of what this meant to your family, fear of the addiction to drugs and alcohol. I think fear got you to act and take action and change. Fear is not always a good thing, but sometimes it can be. How did you think about fear then, or how do you think about it now? How has your mindset around fear kind of evolved?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I look back, what strikes me about the question you just asked, and I think about fear and the role it played when I was younger. And I mean, I think the fear was that I was going to be a nobody. Like that was my society, even at that point, and certainly even more so today with social media and the pressure on young people to succeed. We are taught, and I did it too to my kids. My dad did it to me. For those parents who are listening to this, maybe at least consider this. We teach our kids very often outcomes. We set a target, we set a goal, we put it out there, and we teach them how to focus on that rather than how to focus on what's happening right now today and being as successful and happy in what they are doing right at this moment. And outcomes, certainly setting goals is a part of life and a good part of life, but rigid adherence to those goals in such a way that it's destructive is not a good thing. And for me, the fear of not meeting my father's expectations. I mean, some of this is very cliche, but a lot of people listening to this will relate. The fear of not amounting to anything, it actually caused a tremendous amount of self-sabotage because I heard those words from my father about what a failure I was going to be if I didn't get my act together. And I just, that sort of language rooted that fear in me that I was never going to amount to anything. And sometimes it was just like, okay, you know what? Screw it. This is who I am. I'm just going to dive down into this. So that fear of making a mistake. I mean, it's kind of cliche, but it's so simple, and we do it. Our job as parents is to screw up our kids so that they can find a path of curiosity and seeking for themselves.
Interesting.
I'll say this one thing. My mother, and you got this in the book, and I don't know if you remember this quote, but it's one of my favorites. My mother taught me how to think, not what to think. My parents divorced, and my father was a very different person. And my mom was the beautiful person with curiosity and just like living her life freely and bouncing back and forth between my parents. She didn't demand that I please her. Therefore, I ended up, gravitating towards the person that was demanding that I please him by doing things his way. And it caused a tremendous amount of unhappiness. And I recognize today through a lot of work that, a lot of my addiction issues actually came from, that sort of trauma in the first 10 years of my life, much more so than it came from, genetics or circumstances. I mean, everything plays a role, but today I breathe easy in the knowledge that, I was just sort of this lonely little kid, an only child with very young parents who didn't know what the hell they were doing, and as if any parent does. And today I get to carry all those lessons with me and hopefully help my own kids who are now both in their 30s, navigate life a little bit.
What I love about that, first of all, I love how you said we teach our kids something so that they have to figure it out on their own later in a different way, basically, if I paraphrase. But the focus on how we respond in our actions, who we are, what we do, we have to focus on that, but we don't. We focus on the outcomes. We focus on outcomes for our kids. That's what we teach. And if we can get to who we are is our thoughts and our actions, and we have to focus on that, and ultimately, even the fear discussion you talked about was ultimately fear of what other people were going to think. Because, you didn't say those exact words. It was like, what is my father going to think? What is society going to think of me? What all these, just we let society and people dictate so much of what we do from fear of the outcomes of what they think versus just we have to be content with who we are and what we do. What I want to transition to is, and you talked about this a little bit, is for us to be able to do that, we need to have an incredible amount in self-awareness. Self-awareness is so important. And how would you say, where is your self-awareness now, and how did that evolve?
Once again, my brain goes where it's going to go. And so your question triggered this thought that I used a few years ago during COVID, the early parts of COVID. I got hired by Paul Mitchell Studios to do a tour around the country. So here I am, this almost 60-year-old man going into, basically hairstylist training schools around the country to give talks to 18 to 23-year-old girls.
You do have a nice set of hair, by the way, relatively speaking, Charlie. So I'm not going to be asked to talk to Paul Mitchell anytime soon, but go on.
But I'm in these, one of the very first ones that I did, I got a question at the end. I'll just cut to the chase. But the thing that I answered just totally off the cuff is, and she was worried about self-image and social media and all of that. And I said to her, I hear you, but nobody cares about what you're doing. Not really. We think the world is watching us all the time. And I don't care if you have 10 followers or 10 million followers. Almost nobody out there, except for the people with absolutely nothing else to do, are really digging into your stuff constantly, all day, every day. Yet we act and behave as if people are watching us all the time. And heaven forbid we make a misstep or we fail at something, or we don't say the exact right words, or our editing on our YouTube video isn't quite right, or I don't know, whatever the deal is. And I think the biggest recognition I've had in recent years is be authentic. Just be. I mean, I don't really have a choice, frankly, and that's not always a compliment to me. But like, I can't do a job for something that doesn't mean something to me. I can't take on an expedition or support a nonprofit or whatever without it being part of what's in my heart. And I don't mean that doesn't make me some amazing guy. It's actually a real hindrance and a block towards certain types of success.
Yeah.
You know, I've never made a tremendous, I've done fine financially, but like money never hit my top 10 list of things that I cared about. And so consequently, it's the recognition that if I'm doing the things that I'm passionate about and that I really love to do, money will come or it will not come, and
Right.
I'll be fine. And I think the greatest, deepest exhale I've ever had in my life was to acknowledge that I will be fine no matter what,
Right.
and that's a big deal.
So first of all, I think you talked about authenticity and getting like, how much did you writing the book, telling your story, like, was that therapeutic for you? Because now there's nowhere to hide. Like you lay it all out. Like you're laying a little bit out today. You lay it all out in the book. Like there's, you know, if I want to call BS on anything, I'll just go to your book. Right. So and you said this before, you're just an open book. Was it therapeutic and did it help you? And the point for you listening, the point here is start to talk about things, start to talk about your challenges, start to talk about your struggles. And all of a sudden you do it and you're like, you're going to survive it. You're going to be okay if you start to talk about it. And it's very freeing, I think. But you tell me your experience, Charlie.
Oh my God. I mean, it was the best and worst experience of my life. It was best for me and worse for my wife because she had to listen to me complain every single day about sitting down in front of a blank computer screen and putting words down. And I wrote, I mean, everyone should write a book. And it doesn't matter if nobody else reads it. You know, I wrote nearly 700 pages for my 300-page book. I had an amazing editor at Simon & Schuster. And I mean, I really lucked out on a couple of things. But the reality is what I recognized early in the writing process was I couldn't, nor should I, self-edit, write it all down. I mean, I pardon the visual here, but I basically vomited on the page every single day and just put it all out there, you know, as if it was my 12-step recovery, you know, which we're taught. And, you know, AA and 12-step recovery, you know, you got to write this stuff down, even if you light a match to it later so that nobody ever sees that stuff. Like the act of putting it on paper, you know, from your own hand. And I like writing rather than I then like to transfer it to the computer. But like, you know, to do that is so cathartic, and, you know, it's you know, the long, you know, what's funny is, look at this. You're going to laugh at this. I actually found this yesterday.
Oh, wow.
In here. This is the unabridged version. And
that's
like,
amazing.
I was cleaning out some stuff in the office, and
that's long.
My editor had sent this to me at some point, you know, years ago. And anyway, it's you know, it's a great process, and it's a family history right there. And there's stuff in there that plenty of stuff my kids don't know. And my kids are in their 30s. They're both boys, and you know what? They don't care about 99% of it, but maybe someday they will. And so and I didn't hold back. Like there's stuff in there that will, if they read it someday, will be like, oh my God. And I grew up, you read my book. I grew up with a mom my mother started keeping a journal at 10 years old, and she kept one until Alzheimer's took her ability to write, you know, when she was in her mid 60s. And all of those journals are actually at Emory University in Atlanta. She has a beautiful archive there because she was a well-known, you know, writer and activist. And, you know, some of the stuff that's in those, you know, journals, they're her deepest, darkest, everything about relationships and me and my father, and all of that is in there. Some of it I've read, and some of it I'll get to someday. And it's, everyone should write their story. And if you're worried about how many copies you're selling, you're missing the point.
Yeah. Well, I think writing and I think sharing it too. And even if it's just talking to other people, writing for me also has been very just phenomenal, therapeutic, whatever you want to call it. But don't be afraid to tell others and be vulnerable, authentic to others. I think it can be so freeing as well. The other thing that you said earlier that was a little bit subtle, but for all of our hard driving, entrepreneurial, trying to get ahead financially people is, there's like in the book, for example, Good to Great, there's a reference of like, how do we find our purpose in what we do? And the three things in it are, what are we really good at? What are we passionate about? And what drives our financial engine? And I'm having this internal debate. I don't think the financial engine piece should be a part of it. I think if we are doing something that we're really, really good and passionate about, first of all, that's probably that just needs to be the most important. And we'll become good, if we're passionate about it, I think we'll probably become good at it. And if we are passionate about it and become good at it, we're going to figure out the money thing. Don't let the money thing drive what we do. Now, maybe your vehicle for making money can also be it can be the vehicle for your passion, but just, we can't let, I don't think, money dictate who we are too much. We can't let that be a major part of who we really authentically are, in my opinion.
Bill, we use the security argument because we have kids as if we, parents these days, I mean, generationally it goes, my parents were not like this, but like, we somehow don't want our kids to struggle. Yet if we are asked what has made us who we are today, we will say struggle.
Right.
Like most of us will say the hard times are what shaped us, the hardest things that we faced in our lives and whatever. Yet we then want to sweep the road clean in front of our children and not let them have too big a struggle. Why? Well, my joke is like, what do you have against your kids? Like, you somehow think they're magically going to gain life's knowledge by, being put in time out for not taking out the trash. Like that's not a real, that's a chore and a habit and a scenario, and you can teach those. I'm not saying you shouldn't, do those kind of things in your household, but the biggest lessons very often come from the hardest crashes, and to always soften that landing every single time, and to let your kids know, oh, I got a few $1 million in the bank, so don't worry, you're always going to be taken care of. How does that challenge your kids to go out there and live their own life?
Right. And I think I think you're 100% right that we want to provide security. I think the best thing we can show our kids, and it's caught, not taught, is we're living purposely and passionately, and we're going after whatever we're really excited about. And I think, what's really going to happen with money? How bad's it really going to get, right? If we show our kids we're purposeful, we're doing something, we really, really believe in it, hopefully they're more likely to do that too. So I want to shift to, something that had to have, I think, I'll come back to why you did it and like purpose behind that in your next big expedition. By the way, there's been a lot of big expeditions, a lot of insanely crazy, challenging, I can't even comprehend things that Charlie's done. One of them is you ran across the Sahara Desert. So in case Charlie is too humble about this, he ran across the Sahara Desert. So desert conditions, sand, not running on like a track. I don't think it was, cushy, and you're not running 400-meter dashes over and over again. You ran circles a lot at a different time in your life. We'll talk about that maybe. But why in the heck did you run across the Sahara Desert? And tell me more about that. And maybe what was the single hardest day out there? Moment?
Wow, what a great question. So, just 30 seconds of build up here. So when I finally got sober and I ran all those marathons, I finally started to get interested in just seeing how far I could go. And so I ran 50 miles and 100 milers and like hundreds of miles across deserts and jungles and places around the world. And I ended up working, life got a lot better as a sober person. And I ended up working for a TV show as a producer called Extreme Makeover Home Edition. which was one of the top shows on TV. Most of your audience will remember that show from the 2000s. And during that time, I was one of the top ultra distance runners in the world. And honestly, a guy that I had never met before blurted out this thing to me, like this, said, "Hey, Charlie, have you ever thought about running across the Sahara Desert? Nobody's ever done that." And I said to him, "That's like the dumbest idea I've ever heard. There's a reason nobody's ever done it. Like, it can't be done." And I like to say that words, said to us by a stranger in passing can actually change the entire course of our lives if you're paying attention. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I decided and started saying out loud that I was going to be the first person to run across the Sahara. And, firsts are very hard, to come by in the adventure world. There's not many things, usually to be the first at something, you have to like concoct all, I'm doing a pogo stick on top of Mount Kilimanjaro with my hands tied behind my back. Like you have to get very creative. This was just like, hey, straightforward. Let's see if I can run 5,000 miles across the biggest desert in the world. And I got Matt Damon involved. That's another story in itself. I got Hans Zimmer to do the score. Like I had 3 Academy Award winners attached to this thing. And as I always say, addicts are the best salespeople in the world because we spend all our time convincing other people that we're never going to do that again. But anyway, flash forward, me and 2 of my teammates started in Senegal, and we ended up running 2 marathons a day, every single day for 111 consecutive days across Mauritania, Mali, Niger, Libya, and Egypt, all the way to the Red Sea. And it was, needless to say, a life-changing experience.
So just pause and think about that. I want to run a marathon, okay? In maybe a half day or whatever it would take. 2 marathons in a day. So just get your mind around running 2 marathons in a day, which is probably run a marathon, take a break, run a marathon, something like that.
Yeah.
Let's run that when it's nice and cool out in the morning, right? On a track or on a, paved road or whatever it might be. Pretty flat would be nice. So Sahara Desert, heat, probably cold, all the above, dust, sand, footing. Just imagine 2 marathons in a day, 111 straight days. That is insane. I'm not saying you are, Charlie, but that's incredible. So what was the hardest moment? Like what's like, I didn't think we were going to do it.
I got it,
we had to quit.
This is an easy question, actually. And it popped right into my head. And roughly around day 7, it's 125 degree temperature every day where, we're running through deep sand. And by the way, we only had 2 showers the entire 111 days. So like, we're already a week into it, diving into the abyss. Our bodies are tired. My 2 teammates are very dehydrated. So they're on IVs at the end of the day, every day. Hollywood is literally calling me on the sat phone saying, "Hey, so sorry, you guys are doing your best, but we're thinking we may have to pull the plug on this thing because we're not covering very much ground. Like we're falling apart. Support vehicles blew up, like people are quitting, like there's a lot of stuff going on, and it is not, almost none of it is good." And that day was the hardest day. And what I recognized, going back to the beginning of our conversation today, is my attachment to the outcome was so significant. I felt huge pressure. Millions of dollars have been invested. Hundreds of people, their belief in me was put forward in this project. And I felt the pressure of having to succeed. And success to me only meant getting to the other side of the Sahara Desert, at the Red Sea. That was the only version of success I could see. And what I recognized is, just like with the 1 day at a time mantra that everyone knows from recovery, what I had to do was get up on day 8 and focus on the miles that were right in front of me, because those were the only ones I could run, Phil. I couldn't run the miles of next week or next month. I needed to focus on the miles that were right in front of me. And if I ran those, then I got to run the ones the next day. And so I focused on running a marathon in the morning, and that's all I thought about. Took a little break at lunch, got up in the afternoon, focused on running a second marathon in the afternoon. And that was my only thought, and there was nothing else in the world for me except that and my teammates and just making our way across the desert. And by the way, I did take the battery out of the sat phone and I stuffed it deep into my duffel bag so that nobody could reach me for a week. And magically, we began to get momentum. And one day at a time, we started to make our way across the desert. And it was still very hard. But I will also say this, the human body is so unbelievably resilient. And we, as human beings, we quit things in moments. In other words, we think we're having a hard period of time, but very often we quit the race. We leave the job. We quit the marriage. We quit these things when there's a really hard moment, when if we can just learn to let that moment pass by gently and gracefully, it doesn't mean it goes away, but we take the pressure off of that moment. We do the things that we need to do to heal, and we get on with, the rest of it. And I think that was the hardest day though. And that was the best lesson that I ever learned.
Yeah, that's incredible. And again, just trying to put that in context. And you kind of touched on this, but both sides of this story, but how much of physical training, and I say physical intentionally, is physical versus mental? Like, tell me about the physical versus mental kind of balance here.
I have a joke that'll sum it up for you, Phil. 90% of it is mental, and the other 10% is all in your head. Okay, here's the thing, and here's the big difference. And I know because we're going to run short on time if I'm not careful. And here's the way I would sum it up. Me training for the Sahara and a lot of other things I did, I was perpetually overtrained. I was, because I felt like my physical fitness, and like I did, Kona Ironman, I did Eco Challenge for 6 years. I did a lot of really hard stuff where I learned how to suffer properly. And what I didn't know how to do was recover. I didn't know how to rest. I didn't know how to give myself a break. So today, as I'm preparing for future expeditions, my sole focus is on recovery. Sleep is number 1. Sleep is number 2. Hydration is number 3. Nutrition is number 4. And training is somewhere down here in the other stuff, because these are mental. Now, if you're training for a marathon, there's a certain formula you can use if you're trying to set a certain time. And there's ways to do that. And that makes great sense. But ultra running and big expeditions are very much about achieving the goal. And there's no benefit. I do a race called Badwater most years in Death Valley. And I've done extremely well in this race because I know it's 135 miles. And I know it doesn't matter what place you're in when you're at mile 50 or mile 75 or at mile 100. So there's no benefit to rocketing out of the gate and being in first place if all you're going to do is fall apart, before the end of the race. So that's what all these years of experience have led me to.
So I want to come back to, first of all, Badwater. And you'll read more about it in the book, but I learned a lot about it. It's just incredible. Like the challenge of Badwater, and to say I do that most years, like you gloss over that like it's such a small thing. What you're preparing for now is Dead Sea to Everest. So the lowest point on Earth to the highest, absolutely incredible. And there is a lot. Are you afraid of this? I mean, are you afraid of this journey?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of, we're crossing the border here a little bit, Charlie, of fear to danger. So tell me about this expedition that you're doing.
Well, first of all, Phil, when I got sober, my biggest fear all those years ago was that my life was going to be incredibly boring and tedious. I'm like, what am I going to do now? And there
fear
is
can be a good thing.
Right.
Maybe.
Well, there's a mindset, and you read the book, the first 65 pages, you're wondering if I'm going to survive. And there's a mindset of craving that danger. And I recognize that in myself, but I actually believe that from a calculated standpoint, most of my risks are very calculated, and I educate myself, whether it's climbing Everest or, during this Dead Sea to Everest, I'm rowing across the Indian Ocean. Like, I'm doing some things that I'm not good at and don't really, I'm certainly not an expert. So I'm trusting the resilience that I've learned through the years, and the recognition that, in my view, the fun doesn't really begin until everything goes wrong. And I do embrace that mindset. I don't want to force it to go wrong, but like, I know it's going to. So therefore, I am going to be mentally, prepared for that piece. But fear is those people who say that they're not afraid of doing something, really hard like this, who's not afraid of, like, let's say you've got the best business idea in the world. But it's going to take, 50% of your savings to start this business, or all of your savings. Like, are you not just scared to death the day that you write that check? I mean, You're excited, but it's just, we look at that as like, oh, that's just part of life. Mine is physical. Therefore, it's a little more visceral in the way people feel about it. But, yeah. Also, I want to say, man, you should envision this as like, I don't believe in doing physical things to set records or to be like, there's no such thing as the best athlete or the best adventurer. People are trying to build their platforms off of I believe in doing hard things on purpose, but I'm not interested in riding my bike or running across a desert as fast as I can and not interacting with the people. It's cultural exploration. I jokingly say I want to be, as I get older, I want to be Anthony Bourdain of adventure. I want to laugh with people and see how they live and do all of that while I'm crossing through their homeland, respectfully. And like that is the attitude I want to take to everything that I do is people get fixated on the physical undertaking, but it is the emotional and human aspect of what I'm trying to do that's important to me.
And you talk about that, I want to tie that to your attitude and approach to it. But like, if you really dig deep down, and I think, or I trust you have, why did you do this, Sahara? Or more importantly, like, why are you doing why? Like this, Charlie, this is crazy. Why are you doing this? Like, why? Yeah. Like, really deep down, why are you doing this?
I'm happy to say that it's an evolution. When I'm 33 years sober, I just celebrated a couple of weeks ago. And by the way, my way of celebration is, every year I run or bike for the same number of hours to equal the years that I've been sober. So I biked 450 miles in 33 hours, here on a trail close by. And so I want to acknowledge the gift I've been given of this amazing life. But I freely admit in those early years, a lot of what I was doing was proving to myself and to the world that I felt like had seen me as a failure, as a drug addict, as a whatever. I needed to show everybody, oh, wow, that guy really is, amazing and cool. Meanwhile, I still had all the underlying insecurities. As I move forward with Dead Sea to Everest, I can tell you with all of my heart that I don't even know. I'll tell you the why when I'm done. Like when I ran across the Sahara, the first interview that I did was with NPR, and it was about 30 minutes after my expedition ended. And on one of the well-known shows on NPR, I got asked the question. The very first question was, how does it feel? And I actually said to the interviewer, and I didn't expect to say this, it just came from nowhere. I said, this might very well be the saddest day of my life. Instead of it being a relief and joy, the recognition that I had just done something that I'll never get to do again, like the immersion into not having this thing attached to me. I ran for 111 straight days, without a phone and without worrying about anything except the singularity of putting one foot in front of the other. And so my goal and my greatest hope for this next expedition is that I get at least moments and days like that again, where I'm not juggling the 50 things that we all juggle every single day. And I can be singularly focused on one purpose, and that's moving forward and seeing what happens.
That's just incredible. And I think I heard you say the same thing when I saw you spoke. Is like, why are you doing this? Because I'll say, when you did the Sahara, there is, I mean, water for Africa. I forget the exact name, but like, there's a lot of amazing things that came out of that. And there's going to be a lot of amazing things that I think come out of Dead Sea to Everest. But you don't know, like, talk about, I'm doing that. You're also like, who am I? How, like, what can I achieve? What am I going to learn? You're very curious, the self-awareness. Like, I'll tell you when I'm done. That is absolutely incredible. I love that so much. I want to talk for about 2 more hours if we could, Charlie, but I don't think we can. The other thing that, maybe 2 things I want to touch on, and I'll just say, I'll leave these as cliffhangers because you got to go read the book. If you haven't figured that out, now go read Running Man. We'll come back to kind of how to make sure people can find you. It's pretty easy, by the way, but Running Man, and check out the book, and then Charlie will tell us about his website too. But you talked about the training for this next expedition, and I want you to, the busyness of how hard you could train versus recover. Tell us how we should think about this for our business, for our training, for a marathon, for our lives, for like activities with kids. How should we think about this?
Man, great question. And look, I do want to say one thing. We very often attack water. Clean water was my focus for running the Sahara, but it also wasn't my focus. You know what my focus was? Me. And that sounds selfish in a way, but we too often excuse away our big efforts as if we're only supporting some nonprofit, or we're doing something that's worldly, as if that's the only charity that we should be doing. The biggest charity that we all have right here in this skin. I want to do this Dead Sea to Everest project, lowest to highest, in order to make myself better so that I can be of service, to the world. I can have more lessons if there are any. I just want to have the best stories when I'm an old guy in a rocking chair at the old folks home, but recovery is really my focus this time. And what I mean is, on a daily basis, how can I train hard, work hard, do all the things that I do, and allow my body to recover? I've entered into an agreement with a group called Unlimited Life. And many of your listeners will know this group because it's led by Dave Asprey, who's kind of the, self-coined father of biohacking. But I think it's true. He is really a master of finding methodologies that allow people to. We don't agree on everything. I'm a hard trainer. He uses biohacking to train less, but still be very healthy. I always argue with him, and I say, look, I still want to be outside for 2 hours running because I want to hear the birds and I want to do all the things in nature. But Unlimited Life is actually putting me through a year-long training program that includes blood work, all the latest biohacking, things like stem cells. We're doing sleep studies. But for the average person listening to this, what I would say is focus on the essentials, focus on sleep. I was one of those people for many years, like maybe like you, Phil, and maybe like a lot of people listening, like I'm special. I don't need as much sleep as all those weaklings out there.
I needed to maximize the hours in the day, and sleep was wasting time. That's what I thought.
Exactly. Yet, if you can ever really allow yourself to focus on sleep, you will find your personal relationships, your relationships with your kids, your wife, your husband, for the women, your whatever those are, and your recovery as an athlete is exponentially better when given the opportunity to recover. I'm not saying it's easy for me because I'm anxious every single day. Part of it is I love running. I love being on my bike. I love just being outside. You literally can't pay me to go into a gym to do this stuff, generally speaking. Yeah. I want to be outside. I want to feel nature and hear the birds and enjoy nature. And that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think
Charlie,
that's it.
Charlie, this has been so incredible. And I want to just, there's 5 other things I want to talk about. Let me tell you one that we're not going to tell you the story because you got to go get the book. Charlie, I think unjustly, read the book, spent 18 months or so, in federal prison.
Yeah.
You got to check out that story. He completely changed the culture, in my opinion, of the prison. That's how his name Running Man came about. There's a whole story behind it. I'm going to stop there and don't tell too much, Charlie, because they got to go get the book and check it out. We're going to go there in a second on how to find Charlie. Before we do, Charlie, if you just step back and reflect, you think about what you've done, what you're doing. How does what you do? How does it make you feel?
Oof, man, thank you for that. Most days it makes me feel amazing. I feel really good about, hopefully about authenticity, about being genuine, but also about, I think the greatest lesson I've learned through the years as an addict and even moving into my business life early on, I was very transactional. And I wasn't meaning to be, but it just was kind of like human nature. What am I going to get out of this? And the biggest shift for me decades ago was the recognition that, I needed to try not to be transactional in relationships. If I meet someone and they are the president of some company that I would absolutely love to do business with, I have to shove that aside and say, do I want to be this person's friend? Am I there to support them? Is there something that we can do together, that can change the world? And that's how I think that's the growth that I've come to, is to recognize that going through life in a way that my very first sponsor taught me. And I know I said this when I spoke to your group, and that's this simple saying: to keep it, you have to give it away. And I want to just keep that mindset for the rest of my life. And what that simply means is whatever your gift is, coaching, singing, art, music, like money, whatever that thing is, whatever that gift you have, if you're not freely giving it to other people without an ROI expectation, that's the key. Are you only doing it because you're going to get something tangible out of it? Or can you see that if you do this thing, you're the one who's actually getting served? You get to fill your cup up while helping someone else. That's really all I want to do with every project I do for the rest of my life. Yeah.
And if you do the right things and you do it and you just, to keep it, you have to give it away. If you do that, you will be just fine. You will get so much back. You'll get it in spades. Charlie, first of all, you've been so generous. You didn't have to come on this podcast. You didn't have to do this. And you've been so generous. You're impacting, by the way, so many people. You didn't even really talk about that, but you're having a great impact on people's mindset in ways you don't even know. So I appreciate it so much. How can people find out more about you? Where do you want to direct them?
Yeah, thank you, Phil. And I mean, my website, which is just my name, charlieengle.com, has all the social media handles. I'll be honest, in recent years, I made a priority of deprioritizing social media a bit in my life. That'll change with some of the things coming up because I have brand partners. I have folks that need some recognition and deserve it. But also I would say to your listeners, and I know I said it to you and your group when we talked, that was a GoBundance group, that people will be, there's going to be opportunities to come out and actually join me during Dead Sea to Everest.
What an opportunity.
Come for a week. There will be a section through Saudi Arabia, one in Oman, one in India, and one hiking into Everest Base Camp for very limited numbers of people. And, it'll be fun and hard and interesting. And, life isn't a race. It's continuous forward movement wins the day. And so put yourself in a position where you're going to do something unexpected, whether it's this or something else. Do hard things on purpose. I know you've had other guests that believe in that philosophy also, because if you don't choose some of the hard things for yourself, life is just going to throw them at you anyway. So
right.
You might
build a mindset for it too.
Exactly. Well, the more things you do on purpose, I don't care if it's running a marathon or whatever that thing might be, the better prepared you are when that thing comes out of the blue that affects your family or your job. Like you have to, this is, they're all tools to make yourself ready for the hard times, because the hard times are always going to reappear.
Yeah, Charlie, I can't thank you enough. I would just say, first of all, if you're listening to this and this had an impact on you, and I know it did, share this with a few people. Do me a favor. Like, let's help Charlie get this word out. I'm not going to ask you to buy a book. I'm going to ask you to buy 5 of his books and give it to 4 buddies, your girlfriends, your boyfriends, whatever it is, spouse. Buy 5, share it with somebody, give it to them, and say, hey, let's talk about this when we're done. But go check out Charlie Engle. Follow him. If you want to run alongside him or be a part of this, think about, are you willing? Are you up for the challenge? I'm considering it. I'll say that. And I want to know more details about what I maybe would be signing up for, Charlie. And honestly, Charlie, I just want to thank you again for coming on, for sharing your story. There's so much even more to it that we didn't have time for today. I'm truly grateful, Charlie, for your time. And thanks so much. For the Purpose Matrix, signing off.